welcome back to Love Your Food. It's getting back to being soup season, and we've never actually done just regular chicken noodle soup, so that's what we're going to be doing this week. But we're also going to be showing you how to basically make your own soup concentrate from scratch. And we're going to be making the chicken noodle soup only from part of it. The rest we're going to set aside so that we can make future soups. So our ingredients, we're starting with some chicken stock, a shallot, some onions, some leeks, carrots, celery. We're going to be using a potato. We've also got some great fresh herbs from our herb garden. Now, and for the chicken noodle soup, we're going to be using some star pasta, tomato, and some roasted chicken, as well as some zucchini. Now, we've done a couple of different kinds of roasted chicken. We'll show you how to do those. Now, or I'll link you to them at least. And for the veggies, we're going to start our soup base with some carrots. So we're going to peel these. If you were making a dark stock, you might want to leave the skin on and just give them a good scrape. But for soup, you don't really want that sort of earthy flavor in it. So we're going to take the skins off of these for that. And then we want pretty small pieces, but they don't need to be tiny. It's fine if we have some fairly al dente pieces of carrot in the final product. And the same goes for the potato. They're going to be about the same size. And the potato, really, you can use whatever potato you prefer for this. Some of them will end up breaking down a little bit more than others, and in that case, it'll thicken the soup a little bit more. And some of them, like this one, will end up just with pieces of potato in the final product. Whichever you prefer, that's really entirely up to you. You don't need to worry about that too much. It can be different from soup to soup. And then for our leeks, we're also going to cut these actually very, very small. We do want these mostly to sort of melt into the broth. So we're going to make very, very thin little slices of this. Now, you've seen us use leeks several times in the past on this channel. And typically we have frozen leeks that we've already sort of cleaned and frozen. These are fresh leeks. So we're cutting them a little smaller than we normally would because they're going to be a little tougher because they haven't been frozen yet. So we've got some oil in the pan. And just use your favorite neutral oil for that. And in goes our carrots, potato, and leek. And we're just going to start these off a little bit. We want these to cook for a little while before we get everything else in there, because they are going to take the longest time to cook. A little bit of salt. And if you want, you can cover that as well. And then we're going to get our celery ready. Now, this may look like a lot of celery. Again, this is going to be a sort of concentrated soup base, so this is not just the celery for one round of soup. Now, if you like celery, you can cut them a little bit bigger like this. If you don't like to have pieces of celery in your final soup, you can always make them a little bit smaller, and they're just going to basically completely melt into your soup. That's whichever you prefer. Our shallot, we want to cut pretty thin and small. So we're going to give that a very, very thin little slice. And then we're going to chop that into a pretty fine dice. Now, it doesn't need to be pretty. Because we're cutting it so small, it is basically going to completely disappear in your final product. You're not going to see little bits of shallot or anything. Onions, pretty much the same. We want a pretty fine dice on there, so we're just going to cut through and then give it a good dice. So there we go with our onions. And you just want to make sure you have no huge chunks or anything, or outsized pieces. And then that's going to go in on top of everything else in our pot. So once these are all cooking and everything on the bottom has had a good time to sort of release some of their juices and steam everything above it, you can see here we just got everything nice and level in there. Another little dash of salt on our onions. And then we're going to lid that and let everything sort of steam in there together. We're just going to let it cook down, get all nice and wilted underneath. Let the onions get a little bit translucent. And you can see everything on the bottom has started to cook pretty well. There's not a lot of color or anything yet, but it has started to soften. We're going to give this a stir just to make sure that the stuff on top gets a little bit more heat and gets a little bit more direct heat. And also it's sort of to let some of the flavors mingle as well. So you can see everything's just starting to cook. The leeks are starting to get a little bit limp. The carrots look a little bit round on the edges. They're starting to cook a little bit. So this is just about right. We're going to add our spices. We have a bay leaf. We have some thyme stems, as well as a little bit of marjoram. We're just going to toss that in. And you can use whatever flavor profile you want, whatever spices you prefer. Those are just some fresh herbs out of our garden. And then we're going to add 1 container of chicken stock. We prefer the low salt chicken stock, so that we can sort of control how much salt and sodium we put in things. And give it a good blend. And then we just want to make sure that everything sort of comes together a little bit in here. This is sort of the base of the soup concentrate. So we're just going to let all of this come up to temperature. We want to get it all good and cooking together. And there you go, you can see. Now, this is a great base for any kind of soup. We can make all different kinds of soup out of this. Now, we're going to take a bunch of this and put it aside. Or we're going to put it in this large metal bowl to let it cool, and we're going to freeze this. And that's going to be the base for future soups. And what we've got left is just enough to make a nice chicken noodle soup for one serving or for one meal. So we're going to let that stay on the stove and start getting our veggies ready for that. So we're going to cut the zucchini first. And you can cut these into slightly larger pieces. We do want to have these sort of pieces in the final product because it's a great flavor and some great color as well. So in the soup goes the zucchini. And then we're going to add another container of our chicken stock. So you can see it really makes it more soup-like. It was much stewier before. Now it's much more soupy, and we're going to give that a little stir. And then once everything comes up to temperature, you can see it's just barely starting to boil. So there are some bubbles rising from the bottom on the sides there, where Chef Kayla is pointing. So now's the time we're going to add our pasta. Now we have had this pasta for a long, long time. It is extremely dried out, so it takes a little bit extra time to cook. It's not fresh pasta. So do be careful and follow the cooking times of the pasta you want to use. This is going to take a little extra time, so we're just going to stir that in and give it a little bit of time to cook. So while that's happening, we're going to prepare our chicken. So we took the chicken. This is thigh meat. We took it off the bone. And we're just going to give this a chop into little bite-sized pieces. We've taken the skin off as well. If you want, you can garnish with some skin and get it crispy in a frying pan. We didn't do that for this dish, but it is totally something that we have done in the past, and you're welcome to try it. It is delicious, especially if you've done a really nice rub or marinade on your chicken. Okay, so back to our soup. Everything's come up to temperature. You can see the little pasta stars are starting to expand just a little tiny bit. So now is the perfect time. We're going to add in our chicken. And this is already cooked, so we don't want to cook it a whole lot more. We just want to bring it up to temperature. Now putting cold chicken in will bring the temperature of the whole soup down, so we do want to let everything come back up to a simmer. So while we're waiting for that to happen, we are going to get a few more fresh herbs going here. So we have a little bit of fresh thyme, some marjoram, a little bit of savory, and some parsley. Again, these are just all herbs we have growing out in our garden. And we want to give these a good fine chop. We want them to be pretty small. We want them to be an interesting accent color and spread their flavor all the way through the soup. So we want to get them good and fine. And you're welcome to do any kind of spice mix or herb mix you like for your soup, whatever sort of flavor profile you prefer. So there we go. There's our herb mixture. We are also going to add a few green onions, which we also have growing in our little herb garden. And you just want to give those a nice thin slice on the bias. And they're quite visually attractive that way, and have a nice texture as well. We also want to add a little bit of tomato into this. So we have these beautiful fresh Ontario tomatoes right now. So we're just going to give that a good slice. Now it helps to have an extremely sharp knife for this. And again, you just want bite-sized pieces. Now this is going in right at the end. It's not going to cook for very long. We just want it to get up to temperature. It's not going to fall apart. So you're going to have these nice sort of sour pieces of tomato in there, as well as all those beautiful fresh herbs. And those nice pieces of chicken, those zucchini. It's all going to be really, really lovely together. So once that soup comes back up to the simmer, you can see those pasta stars are just about completely cooked now. So we're going to add in our tomato, and then all of our herbs and green onions. Then we want to give that a good stir, just to make sure everything's well combined. And we just want to let it sit there until everything has come up to temperature. And now's a great time to taste it while we're waiting for everything to come up to temperature. So take a little bowl. If you find any sort of thyme stems or anything like that, now's a great time to remove them as well. So now we're just going to give it a taste. If it needs any seasoning, now's the time while everything's coming up to temperature. So we're going to add a little bit of salt, some nice fresh cracked black pepper. We're also going to add just a dash of vermouth into that as well. It gives a little bit depth of flavor, that nice sort of acidic zing to it as well. Really fantastic. If you don't have a bottle of vermouth in your kitchen, you really should. It's a very good sort of overall cooking ingredient, just to add to a lot of different things. We've adjusted the flavor, give it a little retaste. And then from here, it's just serving. So it's a very hearty soup, as you can see. But we still have a whole other concentrated soup base that we can use to make soup like this, or whatever we want in the future. If we have leftover turkey, if we have a bunch of garden vegetables that we don't know what to do with, we can just pop it into a soup. Super easy, and that's it. That's the whole thing. So here's a great way to get those amazing summer flavors into a soup that you can have it while the temperature's coming down now. We're right in there getting into soup season, and we hope you'll give this a try. So if you like this recipe, please do like and subscribe, and if you have any recipes you'd like to see Chef Caleb try on the channel, please let us know in the comments below. And remember to love your food.